The Australian Medical Association, AMA, is the federal peak body representing doctors from right across Australia. Foundstone worked with their CEO, board, leadership team, staff, as well as their federal council and a number of external stakeholders from across the health sector, helping them open up their organisation-wide strategy process. We help them discover unique and nuanced insights, both internally from across the organisation, as well as externally from right across the health sector, enabling them to make really informed strategy decisions. We chat with their CEO, leadership team and staff about the process, outcomes and impact.
To me, open strategy development is an iterative process. You ask questions, you involve different groups of people, you take your learnings and you build something that is stronger than what a closed loop process would really do.
As a leader of the organisation, the open strategy process really opened my way of thinking.
An open strategy process produces organisational change and produces momentum forward, where you're bringing many people along because they've been involved in strategy development. They understand where you're going, and ultimately they're there to support strategy and they feel that it belongs to them.
Look, I've been at the AMA for nearly 20 years, actually over 20 years, and we've had plenty of strategy sessions over the years, but what I've found in the main is that they've been very much closed to what was then Federal Council and subsequently the board. And whilst they've engaged me in some of those discussions, they certainly have never really sought to engage the broader staff group.
Being comfortable with not always having the answer, and being really comfortable with the CEO not always having the answer, and to draw from the collective resources and the thinking across the organisation, right down from the newest staff member to the most senior board member in the organisation. Our resources are really the brains in the organisation, so why wouldn't you tap into this most precious resource?
In developing the strategy for the AMA, I did not want to take a closed approach where you have just a small group of people take all of their assumption, all of their biases, all of their history into a room and develop a plan that looks like more of the same. I wanted an opportunity for us to reflect on all the tremendous successes we've had and the strengths in advocacy and government engagement, and look at how we capitalize on what works, but also have an honest assessment of what does not work and what must be improved. And to me, open strategy process allows you, your board, your senior leadership team, and your entire organization to step through the time and the process it takes to get to the right answers.
Looking back at the early sessions that we held, where we started to build the foundation for what the strategy would be, there were no bad ideas. And while eventually maybe some of them would turn out to be bad, you've got to take the time to consider them all properly, understand where they're coming from, what is it you're actually trying to get to, and then refine those ideas. And that's really how we all collectively were able to drive a strategy that we have some say in, that we've been involved in, which really helps us when we sit down at the desk at the end of the day, when we're doing the work for the members, when we're doing the work for the patients and the health system, we're able to say, yeah, we're achieving this goal that we helped to create ourselves.
Collaboration with Foundstone Advisory gave us a partner who walked beside us through the open strategy process and assisted me as the CEO to manage the process seamlessly, as well as adding a perspective that was professional, expert-based in its own right. It was a real value add to our open strategy process.
Being in the same room with the board and the CEO at that level really helped me to understand the strategy and the direction that the organisation was heading in.
But I think the process encouraged people to be really active in the discussions, and often throughout the days we had, you would see the board step back and let the staff fill the space in terms of discussion. And so again, that's a really important environment, and I think staff grew not only in building a relationship with the board, and I think they've grown in understanding the context that the organisation operates.
Once you've gone through this process, anything more traditional than an open strategy process would seem really odd and too traditional and backward in progress.
It really made us feel a lot more aligned as an organisation, as individuals. We have more trust with each other, we have a better shared understanding, and that alignment is genuinely very powerful because we have a lot of very clever, very committed, dedicated doctors and professional staff, and having them align their efforts in the same strategic direction is how powerful transformation happens.
I can often explain to staff what the response is to their perspective or give them guidance around that perspective, but it makes a real difference when they're engaged with the real key decision makers at board level about what they think and what they feel, and to understand the context in which board's making decisions and the extent to which staff's considerations are taken into account.
Part of our job, we speak to members every day, and we represent all doctors in Australia at all stages of their career, working city, country, public hospitals, private hospitals, general practice. And you hear a broad range of views on the health system, a broad range of feedback on what is going on when doctors sit down with their patients. But you also hear the everyday concerns that we don't always see in the media. So a lot of the struggles that doctors sometimes are having, either with the regulatory burden or just the everyday challenges of life, and being able to take that individual feedback, which sometimes gets lost in those bigger surveys, and input that into the strategy to make sure that those individual concerns and every member voice is heard, is really, really meaningful for the work that we do here.
If you just end up with strategy as a document, the inevitable next step is you have to run around and pitch it to people to convince them that it's a good idea. If you've had a process by which you workshop some of the problems, the challenges and the opportunities, and a strategy is a joint effort, a cumulative effort where people have chipped in their perspectives and they believe in your assessment of the challenges and the direction, the final result does not need to be marketed. The implementation becomes a much more straightforward endeavour. And to me, that's a genuine strength of an open strategy process because it translates into trust and culture.
Very often in an organisation, we can be siloed in our little spots, but coming into the room with everyone across the whole organisation provided me and my people with a different perspective. It gave us the view across the organisation and helped us to understand where others were coming from, and to then be able to work together and to implement our operational plans that aligned with strategy.
When you develop strategy, it's important to have the internal conviction and the courage to start with a point of inquiry. You want to know what you don't know, and you want to genuinely understand where the organisation is succeeding and where it needs to go, and conversely, where its challenges are.
Whenever you start at a new place, you always know that there is an overarching strategy, and you often sit down and it's one of the first documents that they give you, the organisational strategy, and you go, cool. And you might look at it again from time to time, but usually you never see it again until it gets updated and it's imposed on you by the boss, maybe by the board, and you go, cool, and you look at it again in 3 years' time. But this time around, having Natalia's idea and a bit more engagement with the board, coming to us and saying, well, what do you think the strategy should be? Or how can you, what ideas do you have for how we should go about achieving our goals? I think that was a really meaningful way, not just of shaping the strategy, but making sure that everybody is involved in the strategy as well.
As part of our open approach to strategy, I really wanted to involve the extremely experienced and very insightful senior leadership team I have, and involve their perspective and enrich the discussion my board was having. My board are doctors from right around the country, and they really understand what the AMA does and how important that work is for doctors. But when you combined the expertise of my professional senior leadership team, as well as the insight of my doctor board together, it truly enriched the process and resulted in a strategy that was meaningful.
More than anything, it's been really good just to expose so many people to these strategic processes and to the idea of the board and what it does and what its role in the organisation is, because so often we have to do our reports to the board to say what we've been doing and help them understand what we're doing. We rarely get that feedback from what the board has been doing, and so this has actually opened that up, and so now we do have a bit of a dialogue with the board. People who wouldn't have otherwise understood who they are or what they do now do, and they may actually start to think about, well, maybe I want to be involved in governance at some point. I want to help building strategy for this organisation or another one. So that's been really positive from my perspective.
Staff are now very committed to the strategy that we've got in place, and already you can see that many of the sort of goals and objectives that have been put in the strategy, people are actively working on those, and we've probably ticked off a few already.
Having the board and the senior leadership team together with my input created this really genuine and helpful exchange, two-way exchange of ideas, of concerns, and of analysis of our external environment as well as internal strategic opportunities. And again, that two-way process truly strengthened the strategy development.